So over in the UK, there's a group called Extinction Rebellion that's been causing a large number of public disruptions as part of protesting climate change, and this means they've blocked traffic, which if you've ever been in London, it is already a mess there, but bridges, public transportation. And so this organization, it was formed by some academics in Britain last year, and they have other, offshoots at a lot of other countries. And they're explicitly, their aim is to keep engaging in these publicly disruptive protests in order to get the government to adopt their agenda, which consists of, in Britain at least, declaring a climate and ecological emergency, reducing greenhouse gas emissions to zero by 2025, halt biodiversity loss, and be led by citizens' assemblies on climate and ecological justice. And as bad as that is, the thing that really I find offensive about this is that they are claiming, and the media is characterizing these as peaceful protests. And it's being they're saying that these guys are using peaceful protests but in order to disrupt infrastructure, to force people to confront the climate emergency and interrupt their daily lives so that they will have to take action on climate change. And like, that is not peaceful. In fact, I think you can make a strong argument that it's a criminal organization, in that like their whole mission is, we're going to violate, whether it's traffic laws, or like, our whole goal is to stop people from being able to get to where they want to get, to being able to travel, from being like, let's rob people of their time and their lives in order to embrace our agenda. Never mind the content of that agenda, which would be which would truly result in extinction of the human race. And so I mean, treating this as anything other than an organization that should be viewed with like the largest amount of disdain, and arguably as criminal, I find really offensive.
Yeah, I agree. Lock them up.
The best thing I read by this on this, by the way, is from a former Power Hour guest, Brendan O'Neill, and I highly recommend everybody look up the cult of Greta Thunberg, because he just has a lot of gems. But just one piece of it that I found just perfectly captured what's going on here. He said, "It struck me that this was a march against people. Most radical protests and direct action is aimed at officialdom or government or people with power. This macabre schlep through London was aimed squarely at ordinary citizens. Banners and placards made no disguise of the marchers' contempt for how the masses live. We were told that meat equals heat. That is, if you carry on eating meat, you fat bastards, the planet will get even hotter. And that driving and flying are destroying Mother Earth. Of course, it's okay for them to fly. Emma Thompson jetted first class from LA to London to lecture us, please, about our eco-destructive holiday making. It's only a problem when we do it. It's only bad when we take advantage of the miracle of mass food production and the expansion of flight to make our lives fuller and more pleasurable. They detest that. They detest mass society and its inhabitants, the masses." So just a lot of gems like that.
I'm surprised Emma Thompson went as low as first class. She's not doing a PJ, private jet. Maybe her career is not at its peak. I mentioned that in part because one interesting thing about private jets, which I do not fly, but I've been on a couple of them, and just because events I was going to, there were other people going. Actually, one time I went on a private jet with Alex Trebek, which is a whole fun story. Or at least it was a private plane. I don't know if it was a private jet. But one thing that's fascinating is that so many really successful people, even if they claim to be environmentalists and want to reduce their CO2 emissions, fly private jets. And Warren Buffett wouldn't talk about so much about reducing CO2 emissions. So I don't mean to cast any aspersions on him, but he's an interesting example because he's known as a super modest person in terms of, he pays $2.52 a day or whatever in the mornings to buy an Egg McMuffin. I forget exactly what the details of his commute are. And, he's drinking cherry Coke and living in the same house in Omaha for a long period of time. But he'll say, I live just like any college student, except I fly a private jet. And if you look at the economics of it, it's so expensive to fly a private jet, but it's so worth it to people because it is the amount of money that they can spend. It's an amount of money they can spend, a large amount that gets them more time. And you can see with Elon Musk, for example, he's been called out by some people for just flying around in a private jet all the time. And the idea is, well, my time is important. And you just think about that is true. Your time is important, but that means other people's time is important to them. And what these terrorists are doing is that they're terrorizing people's time, really, or they're at least interfering with people's time. They're taking away their irreplaceable time in in the name of this other agenda. And there's something very perverse about regarding that as peaceful. And I think the perspective is, well, if we're interfering with a government, yeah, that's bad. That's violent. That's warlike. But if it's just people, I mean, if we're just stopping people from building projects and going about their lives, oh, well, that's no big deal. Like your lives belong to us. If we think that you're bad, if we think you're doing something bad, yeah, then you owe us any amount of attention and slowing down of our life that that we decide.